Hey, how's it going? And I think we're going to have Clay joining me today as well.
Howdy.
If you haven't met us before, I am Dave, the CEO of Gravity Wiz, and this is Clay, our CTO. Thanks for joining us for it must be at least our 15th, maybe 16th workshop. The focus today is going to be on API Alchemist. If you haven't heard about it, it is just a very, very powerful and flexible plugin for pushing, pulling, and populating data to and from Gravity Forms. We're going to go over some of that today, but before we dive into the nitty gritty, I thought it was actually a really fun experience I had this past weekend. I was hosting a wedding for my sister-in-law, and I met my first Gravity Perks customer in the wild. And to be clear, I've met tons of Gravity Perks customers or Gravity Wiz customers at like WordPress, centered events, but never have I met one just at a random non-work affiliated event. And I was really excited. I was so excited, in fact, that I actually met up with this customer for lunch because she was in town for a few more days after the wedding. And I'm curious, Clay, when's the last time you've met a Gravity Wiz customer?
I remember meeting a few in Manhattan, but I've yet to in my hometown.
Yeah.
I need to get the radio station sold on it.
Yeah, the really cool thing is that Gravity Perks customer, or I keep saying Gravity Perks because that's the product that she's using, but that Gravity Wiz customer is now my aunt-in-law. So yeah, like it's all in the family now. Pretty cool. So Clay, I'm hoping you could just tell us a little bit about your inspiration for API Alchemist.
Sure. So API Alchemist was kind of grown out of a few wants, I suppose. So we've had GPPA for, 7 years now, 6 maybe. And along the way, we've had this snippet that's been really popular to wire up, populate anything with JSON APIs. The problem is that it takes a lot of code to get set up with. And I just kept thinking, man, in the back of my head, there's got to be a way we could do this without code. I know it's going to be hard, but I think the opportunity will finally present itself. And lo and behold, it has. There are a few other things that kind of spurred it as well. In communities like Post Status, we'd see people asking questions about how can I do XYZ with Gravity Forms, with an external API. And unfortunately, we didn't have a connection for them, but it felt like, gosh, wouldn't it be nice if there's a way to do this with Gravity Forms without, a full-blown connection? Because there's so many APIs out there that it'd be a waste of time on our part to do that many connections and not have a more generic tool to do it. But
that makes a lot of sense because there's a lot of connections that we could add to the Gravity Connect suite. That would just be so simple, and there's not a whole lot of opportunity for us to add value to those individual products. And so API Alchemist is a bit of a catch-all for those really simple API requests that you can just kind of whip up just by reading the API documentation, making whatever requests you need on submission. And honestly, that's just the beginning of it.
Yeah, I was getting started on a new secret project that's going to be a free plugin, and we've long planned for it to be fully unlocked with GC API. I was like, well, this is going to fall flat if we don't have GC API done first. So let me just focus on that and get it done.
Yeah, and it's funny because we did talk about how hard solving that populate anything remote access was going to be. And I'm so happy. I remember when you showed me the first draft of this and how that flow was going to work, it kind of actually blew my own mind a little bit. I was like, oh, wow. So, I mean, that's the beauty of good software. It takes a hard problem and makes it really easy to use. And honestly, I think that's the best segue we're going to have to jump into our first demo right here, the API-based validation. I'm going to go ahead and throw myself onto the screen.
I'll let you take it away.
So API-based validation, right? The premise here is that we want to validate, let's just say a VAT number on our business registration form. We want to make sure it's a valid VAT number. There are a dozen APIs out there that can do this. And rather than writing any custom code or again, installing a plugin specific for this purpose, we can just use API Alchemist, which can do this and any number of other requests for us. And then in order to get this, now typically API Alchemist, it operates on submission. So you submit the form and then it sends the request and something happens. And then that's the magic of Populate Anything though. Populate Anything will allow you to interact with APIs live while you are interacting with the form itself. So let's just walk through a kind of this implementation on a high level, and then we'll go in and actually show you how it all can be set up. So step one, we're going to register this EU VAT API, the VAT number validation endpoint. Then we're going to use Populate Anything to live validate the user entered VAT number by pinging that endpoint. And we'll also store the result of that validation in a hidden field. Because then we're going to use Gravity Form's conditional logic to show and hide the submit button so that it only will allow them to submit the form if it's a valid VAT number. And then just to kind of add a little spice to it, we're going to also add HTML pass-fail messages via HTML fields. So we can just better indicate what's going on to the user, just improve the overall UX of the flow. And then last, this is a bit of a bonus step, but it was something that I thought might be relevant, especially on forms where it is important. It is an important business requirement to make sure that it is a valid VAT number. You don't want anyone to be able to fudge that. We have this new snippet I worked on. It's very likely going to become part of the Populate Anything core. And that is this force repop on submit snippet, which I will show you again. I'll show you as we get into it. But the idea of this is that it is going to, whatever Populate Anything populates into the field, it is going to force that to be repopulated on submission to ensure that that value cannot be tampered with. Okay, with that said, let's start exploring. So again, first step here, we're going to register this EU VAT API VAT number validation endpoint. So to do that, we're going to go over to Forms, API Connections. With API Alchemist, you can register essentially connection profiles. And you can see I have a bunch here. But the one that we're particularly interested in is the one right here called EU VAT API. So we're going to click on that and go into Edit. And you can see I already have it somewhat configured, but I'm going to take you through each step of this. And this is actually a good moment for me to take a quick pause and say, given all of the content that we want to get through today, I am going to be using pre-configured demos. I'm really curious. Normally, we do something a little bit more where we'll do it from scratch. Give me your thoughts on this at the end. If you prefer the from scratch, you find that easier to follow, let me know. If you thought that the pre-configured demos were fine, even better, but be honest, whatever feedback you give. So how do we get this data? How do we know how to register this? So we're just going to jump first over here to the documentation for the EU VAT API. And I'm actually going to go up to the top first. And most API documentation is going to follow the similar format. It's going to tell you, hey, here's the URL that you need to ping to make a request. Here's how you authenticate. So we'll just start right at the beginning. This is where we're going to start, the endpoint itself. So I'm going to go back to our feed here, and you can see, I'll just delete that so you can see exactly what I'm pasting in. Boom. And then we're going to go over to authentication. Now I'm already logged in, or I've already logged in, registered an account with this service. And so I already have the API key and I've already pasted it there. But the bit that I will cover here is, it tells you right here, you're going to need to pass that access key as a query parameter. So we'll go here. We're going to say, hey, we know that this key that we've already entered is going to need to be passed as a query parameter. The other option is as a header. And the name of that query parameter is access key. And again, let me just really make sure that's clear because that's where I'm getting it from. And you can see they also spell it out up here as well. So that is it for authentication. This API is ready for us to access. But in order to integrate it with Populate Anything, there is one more step. We need to let Populate Anything know what endpoints are available to it. And so typically you go here and you go to add a new endpoint. Since I already have one set up though, we'll just go in and edit this one. So obviously, first thing you're going to do is give it a name. We're going to call this our VAT validator. Makes sense. And then the endpoint that we want to use is the VAT validation. So again, I'm going to go here to the documentation. I'm going to see, okay, what does it require here? So it says the endpoint is validate. And if you're ever curious, most of the time they do provide like a curl example. So you can go out and see exactly what the URL should look like. And you can see here, I've already added that into my URL. I'm actually, don't think we need the slash at all. You can see that the URL is generated based on that endpoint. And then if we go over to the next step, it will make a sample request for us. And now this is something that we're probably going to polish at some point, but I'm going to jump ahead one step really quickly just so I can show you something. So this request, we know that we need to pass a VAT number. And so what I've done is I've gone ahead and jumped ahead to the query parameters, and I've added that VAT number as one of the query parameters that we're going to pass to this request. And so now if we go back, you're going to see that there is this VAT number field here that allows us to provide a test value. So now we jump back to our content here. I can get one of my test values, and I'm going to go ahead and enter that in. And you can see now that it's used that, it's refreshed the request, the sample request, and this is all of the data that has been returned. Now the property mapping, this is essentially what allows you to say, hey, this is the specific data that I want. This response is so simple. We're just going to leave it as is, but you can go in and customize the response. If you only want to return a specific property, for example, we're only going to actually end up using this is valid property. But again, just for simplicity, we're just going to leave this intact as is. So what is this? Again, this is going to be one of the query parameters that we're going to pass. When we get to the form, we're actually going to map a form field to this query parameter so that when it makes the request, it will take the value of that form field and send it along with the request. And then last, there is this option to do cache settings. If you're on a live server, I would definitely recommend leaving that enabled. So that way it's not, for requests that are identical, it won't make the request over and over again. It will just use a cached response. Great for performance, also great for not consuming all of your tokens. For example, I believe this service gives us, I don't know if it's listed anywhere, but it gives us 200 requests for free per month. So if we left caching enabled and we submitted the same VAT number, then it wouldn't consume a request because we already have that request cached. But again, for the demo, we just want to keep this as fresh as possible. So we're going to disable caching altogether. Update endpoint. We're all good to go on this side. Now it's time to jump over to the form. So we are going to open up our form, and I'm going to go ahead and close these other tabs just so we don't get confused. So you can see on our form here, we have the VAT number. This is just a single line text field. Has the VAT number. This is where the user would enter the VAT number. This is a single line text field as well, but you'll notice it has a little icon there. And that is because down here in the advanced settings, we have the visibility set to hidden. We'll cover that in a little bit more detail in a second, but essentially this is not a field that is intended for the user to interact with. It is going to be dynamically populated by populate anything. So how does that work? Well, if you come here, we're going to click this populate value dynamically option. And for the type, we're going to select API Alchemist. For the connection profile, that's going to be the EU VAT API connection profile we just created. And then for the endpoint, this is what we just registered at the last step, and that's the VAT validator endpoint. So this is the part that I was telling you where it will allow us to map those properties. In fact, I just really want to take a second. There's no rush. So let's actually just look at this really quick so you can fully understand what's being mapped here. So again, the connection profile is just this object as a whole. And then the endpoint, the VAT validator, that's this right here. And then this VAT number property, that is what I was showing you here. So you add these properties and then they'll show up in there, and then you can map those properties to field values or other values for that matter. So if you had specific forms where you want to pass a static value, that is absolutely doable. In this case, we want to map it to our VAT number field. That's this one right here. And so it's going to take whatever we enter in this field and then make an API request to that endpoint with that VAT number as the VAT number parameter. Lastly, what do we want to do with the response? In this case, we have the value template. So this is saying, hey, what value do you want to populate into this field? In this case, this is, again, all that data that we have access to. The only thing we care about is if it's valid or not. If it's valid, we're golden. If it's invalid, the show stops there. So let's jump into, I think the submit button is actually our most important item here, because this is what's going to prevent them from submitting the form if it's invalid. So you can see our little helper field here is valid VAT. We're saying, hey, if that's a 1, aka valid, then we want to show the submit button. They can move forward. Otherwise, the submit button will be hidden. Same logic applies to the valid message here. And you can just kind of get a sense. There's just a bunch of HTML in here to make it look all pretty. But the meat and potatoes is going to be this right here. Your VAT number is valid. And then if we look at the conditional logic, you're going to see that, hey, it's going to show this if the VAT is a valid VAT. Message invalid. This is going to be the inverse logic. But again, just showing you what the message says, the VAT number you entered is invalid. And then if we scroll down to the conditional logic, we're going to do two things here. First, we don't want to show them an error if they haven't entered anything. So we do that check. So make sure the VAT number is not empty. And then also we check and make sure that the VAT number is not valid. And if it is not, then we show this error message. Okay. So that was all the setup. Let's go and preview this thing. Let me jump back and grab my VAT number here. And we'll come in. Oh, I actually realized I have show hidden enabled. Let me back up just for a second. I'm going to show it to you the way it's going to work, and then we'll take another look under the hood. So this is what the user would experience. They'd come, they'd enter their VAT number. If it's valid, it's good. You come, you submit, beautiful. And then we can come here and we'll just add a random number to it. Now it's not valid. You see that it displays the error message and the submit button is hidden. So last step here, right? I have this whole bit about, preventing tampering, and that's why I wanted to show you the hidden field. So first of all, if you've never used live preview before, it's part of our Gravity Perks suite. It has a whole bunch of really cool options that make interacting with your form in a preview mode a lot easier. So for example, you can enable Ajax on the fly to test things, show hidden fields, unrequire if you don't want to have to enter every field for something that you're testing. But right now we're going to focus on show hidden. Now that that's enabled, you're going to go back and you're going to see that it shows us our little hidden field here is valid VAT. So now if we enter this, you can see that it's returned to 1 because it's valid. And if we change it, then you'll see that it tells us that it's not valid, right? So now what is to prevent some malicious user from going in here and just saying, oh, well, I changed my mind. It is valid because I decided it's valid. Well, nothing. But that's why I wrote this snippet, because I realized for this flow to work, you definitely want this to be a little bit more bulletproof than that. So if we're going to hop over to our snippets, we use code snippets over here. And I have this snippet here called Gravity Perks Populate Anything, Force Repopulation on Form Submission to Prevent Tampering. This is a plug and play snippet, but it does give you a very special CSS class that you can add to any field. And if that field has populate anything active on it, and it has this class, then it will force that repopulation to happen. So no matter what the user may have changed the value to, it will force repopulation of the GPPA value on submission. So let's go ahead and save and activate that. And we will go back to our field here and make sure that we have our class. I believe we already do. Yep, GPPA secure. And now if we go and preview this again, and let's set a bad value there. And let's set it to 1 because we're elite SOAR hackers. And it's valid now. So now I'm going to submit. But you're going to see that it will redirect them right back to the form. No funny business here. Awesome. So that was our first demo of using populate anything in API Alchemist to essentially do live validation, live data lookups with the form, and prevent submission if it's invalid.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in here. We got a quick question from Scott Rice. You may know. Can you provide the demos as exported forms for us to use?
Absolutely. And that's something that we're eager to start doing more of as well. So thanks for that, Scott. Yeah, we will. I don't actually know where we'll post this, but we'll post it somewhere. And I'll also email you directly, Scott, to make sure that you get a copy.
Sweet. Got another one from Scott McDonald. Off topic, maybe, in a real world environment, curious how someone would be able to mess with that hidden field.
Slightly off topic, but I love off topic. So let's go back to that form. So let's put in what we know to be an invalid VAT, and then we're going to go and we're just going to edit. So this is definitely not going to be probably a typical end user action. But again, it's not that hard to do this stuff. So we know that that's the field. So we know that this is the next field. So we could just go in here and just disable the styles on it. And there, all of a sudden, boom, there it is. And now we can just enter a 1 and it's valid. So essentially the fields with the hidden visibility, they're still output to the form, and therefore they are still modifiable by any user that's willing to look at the source code. But also, that's why it's so important to have something that can force that if it's important. Obviously, in some cases, if you're just collecting leads or something you don't really need that level of security. If someone submits the form without a valid VAT, and we're all understanding that it's, your typical user is not going to mess around with it, then yeah, you don't necessarily need to have that level of security, but it is always nice, especially on important forms.
I got one more here actually from Brian. Similar request as the demo export idea, can you maintain a library of example APIs that form creators might find helpful? As I see this demo, I'm wondering what else I can do with it.
That's a great idea. I had not thought about that, but that actually sounds like it would fit really well on the API Alchemist documentation as well. Just a list of APIs that we have either seen in the wild or that we've used in our own demos. Great idea. I hope you're taking notes, Cole.
Yes, sir.
All right. Anything else before we move on to the next demo? And just a heads up, we will make this page available publicly, so you can come in here and get access to all the resources that we've captured here, including our fake VAT number, or they're actually real VAT numbers, our real sample VAT numbers, but great for testing.
We actually do have one more. Does the forced repopulation trigger an additional API call?
So no, if you have caching enabled. But yes, if caching is not enabled. If caching is enabled, then it would get to the point where it would go to make that API request, see that the cache is available, and then pull it directly from the cache. Great question. All right. Let's move on to automation workflows. I feel like my eyes kind of glaze over when I read that word in this market, this AI world, but at the same time, automation workflows are pretty cool. So I hope I can keep your interest while I show you this little demo that we've cooked up. First of all, I got to ask, who here, and you just kind of raise your emoji hand, who here is familiar with NodeMation? And I'll actually pull it up here just to, oops, actually I wanted to go to the, let me go. There we go. This one, dang, that is a sick lightning bolt. So yeah, I like to think of this as Zapier on just a small line of Coke. It is incredible, incredible. Clay was harassing me to use it because he wanted to get us to get off of Zapier. And, you know, when you're the CEO, you're wearing a lot of hats, and it just felt like this big chore to switch over from all of the stuff I had learned how to do in Zapier and then to try to do it in this new platform. But, and I mean this, the very first time that I got one workflow set up in NodeMation, I was completely sold. It is so powerful and it's so easy to use. It's very intuitive. You can kind of see the format here. They really kind of visually lays it out for you. And yeah, I can't speak highly enough about it. If you've used it, I'm sure you agree with me. And if you don't agree with me, I'd actually love to hear why you don't agree with me, because there may be something I'm missing. But enough on pitching NodeMation. Let's talk about how we can use it with Gravity Forms and API Alchemist. So the idea here is that we're going to take a PDF that was submitted from a form. We're going to upload it to NodeMation. It is going to extract all the text from that PDF, and it's going to return that text as a response that we can then store in the entry. Why do you want to do this? Lots of reasons, but one of the most easy to understand is you can actually search that data now directly in Gravity Forms. So for example, I don't necessarily recommend capturing medical information, but for whatever reason, that's where my creativity led me last night when I was finishing up this demo. So I'm going to upload these two diagnostic reports from ER visits for patients. And you'll see how you can search for commonalities across the patients in the Gravity Forms search tool. But that would have been inaccessible because that data was locked away in the PDF. So let's dig in. We're going to go over to API Alchemist, our PDF extractor demo. And just so I don't forget, I want to leave that tab open. There we go. So on this form, we have upload a PDF. It's just a file upload field, nothing fancy there. You will see that I do have it locked down to only accept PDFs. And then we have this field here called PDF text. And this is another interesting thing. If you're not familiar with form visibility or field visibility, let me give you a quick crash course. Again, visible means that anyone can see it, anyone can interact with it. Hidden means that no one can see it, but it is in the source. So technically anyone can interact with it. So again, useful, but you need to be aware of the risk that you're taking. You are still exposing that field, which is something I think a lot of people miss with this. They just assume that it is protected. It is not. So be aware of that. Most of the time, I'm going to say 95% of the time, it's a non-issue. You're just doing it just to kind of improve the UX, keep the hidden stuff hidden, but it doesn't actually impact the overall functionality of the form if someone was to go in there and tamper with those fields. But in the cases where it is important, it's obviously really important. And in those cases, you might consider actually using an administrative field. Administrative fields are not output to the screen, and their value is you can't tamper with it. Even if you put it in the post, it's not going to get saved. So it's like the most secure field. It's reserved for essentially administrators, people who have access to edit entries. If you're wondering now, why did we not use an administrative field on the last demo? It's because administrative fields have no interactivity on the field. So for example, you can't use administrative fields in conditional logic. Well, there's some technicalities there, but just I think that is functionally accurate or practically accurate. So in our case, we needed that field since we were basing conditional logic on the is valid VAT number. That's why we wanted to use hidden instead of administrative. We want it to be output. We want it to be usable in conditional logic, and we accept that that value is going to change based on the populate anything response. With this case, we aren't going to do anything with PDF text until after the form is submitted. We're going to send the request off to NodeMation, and when NodeMation is finished its process, it's going to come back and update this with the power of API Alchemist. So that's it for the form configuration, which means that we can jump in to the API Alchemist feeds. So I have two set up. One of these is for production, one of these is for test. Just ignore that. We're going to go in and look at one of these feeds, and you can see how it is all set up. So in order to set up NodeMation, the first thing that you're actually going to need to do is to access NodeMation. I think I might pin that bad boy. So we're going to go over here. You can see we've added this webhook node. I think that's the word they use. And you can see that when you add a webhook node, it gives you a URL that you can post to. And you actually, the HTTP method is configurable. In this case, we are going to post. And so we've copied that and we've gone here and we've just pasted that right into the webhook URL. So that means that when this API Alchemist feed is processed, it's going to make a post request to this URL. Scrolling down, we are going to, so you have two options. You can either send all of the entry data, which would be all of this, and this is just fake data that it will send for testing, or you can send a specific customized request body. In this case, we're going to send a field name of PDF, and we're going to send the URL for that. And the way I selected that was right here, and then it went down to the PDF field, upload a PDF. And so now it will send a URL to that PDF as the request body with the property of PDF. That will be relevant here in a second. So then coming down here, if all we wanted to do was just send the request and we don't care about receiving a response back, we don't need to do anything else. We're done as soon as we did that. NodeMation could just do its thing. If it, maybe, for example, you're storing these PDFs in some sort of external location, that's all you would need. You're done. But in this case, we actually want to take that PDF. We're going to, again, it's going to go through the whole NodeMation workflow. And at the end of that workflow, it's going to return the text from that PDF back to us. So because of that, we do want to enable response handling because we would like to handle the response. And then we're going to use advanced because who knows how big this PDF is. It may be huge. It may take a lot of time for it to extract that text out. We don't want our server on the hook waiting for NodeMation to do its thing, just eating up resources while it waits. We're going to say, hey, we're just going to send this request. Our server is done. And whenever the server that NodeMation is running on, whenever it is done, its work, it will then send a request back to us. And so that is this URL right here. And if you jump back into here, well, I'll show you that in a second. And then I think the last thing, honestly, this probably is the best time to segue. Let's split it up a little bit. We're going to jump into the NodeMation configuration now. So again, we have this webhook. What we're going to do really quick is we're going to actually listen for a test event. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to submit one of my medical reports. Awesome. And so now you can see that it has received that event and it's captured that data here. So again, we just said where the request body that we customized, you can see that we have our PDF property and there's the PDF value right there. And it also comes with a GC API callback token and a callback URL. This is part of the security of API Alchemist, making sure that you're not getting bombarded with just random requests or processing random requests from, God knows who. You want to make sure this is a valid request that you are expecting and it's authenticated with this token. So let's go to the next step here. Let's go ahead and execute it. You can see this is the data that we have from the previous step. And so in this step, we're going to say, hey, we want to get that PDF. We have a URL to it. It's public. We're going to download it and move on to the next step. So now that we have that file, it's available to NodeMation. Now we're going to use the extract from file step, and it's going to, the operation that we have, there's all sorts of operations available here, extract from CSV, extract from HTML, et cetera, et cetera. We are extracting from PDF. It's going to get all the content and the metadata from that PDF. Yeah, and it's just pulling from this data input here. And so that means now we have all of the text. Oops, actually, I just realized we need to execute that. So let's execute this so you can see what that looks like. So there you go. This is all of the info on that PDF right here. And then we have the text in it. So this is the full medical report, John Doe, 42, male, blah, blah, blah. And so that means that we're ready to do the callback. So now we have the text. What do we do with the text? So we are going to, and this is so cool. This is honestly probably half the inspiration for the way API Alchemist works itself. But you can drag this content And I think it's just as simple. Where is it at? Actually, let me look at that again. Callback URL. So we need to go to the webhook. And we're going to just drag that callback URL right there. And then down here, we do have to do a little bit of fancy work here. We need to build a certain response. So we need to provide it a token, which has been pulled from right here. And then we need to provide the data. And this is the data that we want to get, the data that we've extracted from that PDF. So that's going to be right here. And you can see that that's been dragged to right there. And so that's our little object that we are going to pass back to API Alchemist for it to process accordingly. So if we execute this step, you can see that it did it. And so that means that we could go to the entry now, and we can see that one of these is a test one, but we can see that this is the one we just did and that it has updated this field with the PDF text. Pretty cool. So let's go back to the feed and just finish up kind of explaining the rest of how that worked there. So again, that's the callback URL. It got automatically sent to in the request that we sent to the webhook, and you're able to dynamically map that in NodeMation. And then in the response mapping here, this is one little bit where because I think we need to do a little work here, a little cleanup to polish this UX. But essentially, if you're using something like NodeMation, if you do a test request, it's going to give you something like this: workflow has started, but it's not going to give you the actual response. This is where you need to kind of understand what you're returning. So that, again, comes back to this. We know that we're going to be returning the data and the text. And so that means that in this step, we can just say, hey, we want to return text from the data property that is returned. And we're going to map that to the PDF text field here. And so let's do a live one of this now. Go back up, go to live preview. And so we'll do the second medical report. We are going to submit that. We're going to jump over here, this way, refresh this. And wow, it beat me to it. I thought I could get here so you could see that this was empty first, but it was so fast that it got it done. So now we could look for like similarities here. So for example, we could say, if we're looking for maybe that, we could say, okay, so this is a female patient. These are all the female patients. Or we could look for similarities. So for example, did both of these patients experience shortness of breath? Again, all of that data is now available and searchable and accessible. And you can even take this further. I mean, this was a very simple NodeMation workflow. For example, before we send it back, if we wanted to do more processing on that data here, format it in a specific way, or look for commonalities here in this process, that's all possible in NodeMation. And just to kind of whet your appetite a bit more, this is a great link. If you just want to start browsing through all of the workflows that are possible, it's pretty mind-blowing. So many options. They break it down by category too. So if you're into marketing, there's a whole bunch of marketing flows, summarizing YouTube videos, for example, analyzing landing pages. There's a lot of enrichment option for leads. But yeah, I would definitely encourage you to explore that. There is a lot to do there.
I'm going to take you off script for just a brief moment. So can you pull up the NodeMation workflow again? So the extract from file, this is a very basic example. This is only pulling text that is already in the PDF file, meaning it hasn't been OCR'd. This would be the phase where, you pull in AI to read the file or some sort of library to OCR it. And
Clay, what does OCR mean?
I think it's optical character recognition. But AI is really good at it these days. Another thing that I wanted to show you, I don't think I've shown it to you before. Go back to Canvas and then click on the webhook node. And change the respond portion. You can do respond to webhook node. It's the third one.
This one?
Yep, click that. And then go back to Canvas. Delete that callback at the end. And then here you can add the respond to webhook.
Like here?
Yeah, at the end. And now what's going to happen here is this opens up the ability to use the simple response mode. So you don't have to use advanced if you're using Nodemation. Really, it boils down to how long do we expect this request to happen? How long is the web server going to be waiting for this? If it's, over 3 to 5 seconds, the advanced mode is probably the way to go, just for performance sake and to improve the process of submission. But since this is Nodemation, you have lots of options.
Yeah, and just to clarify that a little bit more, so what Clay's talking about there is, again, we use the advanced mode here. And with advanced mode, again, you essentially hand off the request to the external server, and then it responds to your server when it's done via the callback URL. But there's also this simple mode here where you can have your server essentially wait for the response. So if it is going to be less than what Clay was saying, like 3 to 5 seconds, if it's going to be like a 1 second response, super fast API, then you can just use the simple mode, and then that request will just wait until it's processed and handle it all in one kind of execution. Any questions on all of that?
I actually did see one come through from Scott. It was closer to the beginning of this section, but he was asking, could this be used to read a PDF resume attached to a form primarily used to create searchable user profiles on the front end? The PDF data could now also be searched and read.
Okay, I'm understanding the first half of that. So yes, it could absolutely read a PDF resume attached to a form. And are you saying that the form is used to create searchable user profiles on the front end? And if so, yeah, that's totally feasible. Yes. Okay. I actually am fully understanding. So this is essentially like almost like a user registration flow but they're signing up for a user profile and they are also submitting their resume. So yeah, you could just embed that content. This is also the part where I was saying that it would be really good for a nice AI step there in that flow. So again, after you extract the file here, you could use AI and like a well-crafted prompt to get that data in a specific format that would lend itself really well. Either so you could map that data separately. So you could have multiple fields on the form. So for example, it could be like jobs, like past jobs. And that data could be extracted into its own property. And then you might have education and that data could be extracted into its own property. So you're essentially taking a resume and you could essentially build like a full like LinkedIn profile that you're then self-hosting on your own user directory. So yeah, all very, very possible. And yes, would also work with Gravity View and entry blocks. Any other questions?
I'm not seeing any right now, but I'll keep an eye on it.
Okay. Then let's do the last demo. This one is more of just a how-to with OAuth, because a lot of APIs you're going to find have an OAuth 2 validation or authentication method. And it's normally like, it's normally kind of annoying to do OAuth 2. And I have to say, Clay crushed it. Let me show you how it works. So we are going to use, and actually, first of all, I completely forgot about my script that I had here, but this is what we're doing using OAuth 2 APIs. So we're going to use the service called WireMock, which will allow us to essentially fake OAuth 2 authentication just so you can see the flow of it. And when you're using a service that actually uses OAuth 2, it will work just like this. So I'll go ahead and pull this up because we're going to need it. But the base URL, this would just be whatever to your API that you're going to be authenticating with. But then the authentication, this is the cool thing, right? And I wonder if I can, let's revoke access so we can do this fresh. So you select OAuth 2. Again, we're just using fake client ID and client secret because this is not a real OAuth service that we're authenticating with. And then for the authorization URL, and token URL, you can see here, we're just copying this straight from here. Authorization URI, token URI, we've just copied and pasted it directly into those associated settings. We're leaving the scopes blank, again, because this is not a real API that we're authenticating with. We're just testing this out for the flow. And then again, lastly, you would typically need this, but since we're doing this in a mock version, it'll just work. So again, that was it. Like, I know I kind of just like cruised through that, but it really is that easy. And let me show you the result. We're going to go here. It's going to launch a modal. We're going to just put in my very real password to this. And that's it. We're authenticated. And now whatever request that we need to make to this API with the OAuth 2 authentication, we're clear to make it. And it does handle the tokenization URLs and everything like that. So it's pretty clean. Yeah, I'm super curious if how many people have run into OAuth 2 in the some of the work that they've done where you were just like begging for just a simple API key because it's so much easier to authenticate with, but at the expense of some security, right? With OAuth 2, it's going to be much more secure. And I'm really happy with how easy API Alchemist makes it to achieve that security for APIs that support it.
Yeah, my favorite part about the OAuth 2 is Google has an absolute monstrosity of a list of APIs that you can use. And guess what? They're all OAuth 2 driven. So when you go into GCP or the Google, GCP, to add your clients, you'd add the redirect URL, and now you can play around with all sorts of APIs. You want to do something with, maps or something that, let's say, address autocomplete doesn't do, but you see it in the API, bring it over here and give it a try, or one of the many, many, many other Google APIs. This also works with like Help Scout. They have an OAuth 2 based API. We use Help Scout. So it unlocks a lot of neat functionality there that may not be supported by the Gravity Forms Help Scout add-on, for example. Lots of flexibility if you find yourself in a pinch with APIs.
That is a great point. It's a great way to just explore APIs. This makes it so easy to do that if you were intimidated to try it out and set it all up on your own, this would just kind of almost like a wizard for OAuth 2. Any questions on OAuth 2 authentication?
I'm just going to give it a sec, see if any roll in here, but so far we got nothing.
Yeah.
Feel free to hit the chat with any questions you got. Yeah,
we all keep thinking. And Clay, do you have something?
No, I was just going to say it's admittedly tough to be excited about OAuth 2. So
Are you kidding me? That the silence is not a lack of excitement, but just shock and awe of how easy. It's like, holy cow, you can do what? I did have one pre-submitted question from our very own Danny, and I thought it was such a good question. I could not resist the temptation to show off. But Danny asked, what is your favorite JSON path trick? And this is actually a demo that I cover in the intro video, but we have a connection profile here for the NHTSA vehicle API. And when I was configuring the populate anything endpoints, I had come to this point where I was not sure how to get this data. So for example, let me just show you what is returned by default, right? So when you make this request, it looks up basically all the details of a car by the VIN, and I get this response and it has all these results in it. And you can see it has like the variable, which is the suggested VIN, and then the error code, and then possible values. And I think we get down to 6 or 7. We start getting into more interesting stuff like the destination market, the make. That's obviously very useful. And I was just like, okay, how do I actually target this data? First of all, I was assuming that there was no guarantee that it was always going to be at the same index. So it's not like I could just say, hey, get whatever values at 8 and just assume that that's the make. Well, I guess, excuse me, that would be 7. And that's where JSON path really shines because it can let you search the results by the properties in the object. So in this case, it's basically saying like, hey, first of all, target results. And let me actually take this off so you can see how it narrows it down. So it gets all the results. This just shows the first one. And now we know that each of these results, even though it has the same property title or keys, the actual values are different, right? So now we paste that back in. We're saying, hey, we want to only return properties that have a key of variable and a value of make. And then you can see, boom, it finds it and it can return it. And then just really quickly, I'll show you how, I mean, it's the same concept for year, the model year. Again, just narrows it straight down to that property. And then the model itself, same deal. We can filter all those results down to get the specific object that we want. And it's like one of those things that it's just, it cannot overstate how powerful that is and how useful it is, especially when you're trying not to have to write any code to achieve what you want to do. Now, some people would argue that this is code, and that's fine. I allow it. But you have to admit that this is so much easier than going into a code editor and having to do like a loop to go through each of those objects to then target the item that you want. All right. Cole, anything before we wrap this bad boy up?
I got to share this one.
Oh,
totally off topic.
man.
I wanted to give a major kudos to the entire Gravity Was support team. Huge shout out to the support team. I think everyone has helped me multiple times the past month. Awesome support as always.
Look, I got to say, we say all the time that we have legendary support, and there's only like 0.1% of me left that actually feels cheesy saying that because we come through on that so consistently. It's just, yeah, it feels good. Thank you so much, Ken. I really appreciate that. Oh, thank you, Tiny Thunder. And also very cool name. Fun fact, my gaming handle, Tiny Thunder, is actually Thunder Butter. So I feel a certain affinity for you already. Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. All right, everybody. I hope you had a great time. I hope that this has inspired you to take API Alchemist for a spin. We are super, super eager to hear what you want to do with API Alchemist, what you do with API Alchemist, and even what you find you can't do with API Alchemist, because we are ready to take this thing to the stars. I was looking for a better finisher than that, but we're going to go with it. Anyways, thank you so much for coming, everybody. I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Bye.